Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, welcome. If you've been here for a while, I can't believe you've put up with me this long. So for today's video, I wanted to discuss preparing your car and yourself, your mindset, your EV and your EV mindset for the upcoming winter. I live in Northern Illinois, and here where I live, we have decent summers. Spring and fall are beautiful, but we do have winters that can be quite cold. In fact, a couple of the most successful videos I've ever done have been living with a Tesla in like 26 below zero Fahrenheit. And this video, I wanted to discuss preparing yourself, preparing your car, your EV for the winter season. Now, this comes up primarily because yesterday I got up and the windshields were actually frosted. It was the first time. Now this morning, it is not nearly so cold, but it got me to thinking. And I wanted to share with you guys my experience of living. This will be my third winter going through with an EV as my sole mode of transportation. And so there are 5 specific things that I find to be critical. And then there's several other smaller items, but some of this will apply just to normal gas cars as well, but most of it to EVs. Item number 1 would be regular maintenance. You're going to want to make sure that your car is prepared for winter by completing any regular maintenance and or repairs that the car, you've known that, for a while that it's needed it. It's been coming up. For instance, if you guys have been watching for a while, you'll know that I've replaced rear suspension knuckles on this car. I've also recently repaired paint that had gotten sort of blasted off the front edge of the rocker panels and a tiny bit of surface rust on the metal right there. So I spent a bunch of time, about 6 hours or so, a few weeks or a month or so back, repairing those areas of the car in preparation for winter. The suspension knuckles I did because they needed to be done, but I also knew if I put it off, I'd be stuck with potentially a problem in the middle of winter. And so I wanted to get those things out of the way. And so those are the things I'd say any regular maintenance repairs, alignment, wheel alignment, tires. What are the condition of your tires? Is the tread worn? Again, do they need to be rotated? So all of those things you're going to want to take care of, not necessarily at the beginning of summer unless it needs it, but as summer is winding down, you want to go into the winter time. You want your vehicle to go into the winter time in as good a state of readiness as you can, as good a mechanical state as possible. So and again, that some of this pertains to gas cars as well, but with an EV it's a little bit more critical because you want less to think about with an EV, mainly because you're going to be focused on other things using an EV in the winter time. So that brings me to item number 2, talking about regular maintenance. This would be tire pressure. So tire pressure drops as the ambient temperature drops, and that is because air is compressible, but it expands with temperature. So as the temperature drops, the PSI of pressure in your tires will drop. For instance, right now my front tires are at 39 PSI, my rear tires are at 40 PSI. That's the pressure that I try to maintain, right around 40 PSI year round. Well, my tires were at that pressure back when the weather was 80, 85 degrees out, and as the temperature dropped, right now it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit. As the temperature began to drop, I noticed that I was getting a low tire pressure indicator because my tire pressure was at 34 or 35 PSI, because as the temperature drops, so does the tire pressure. And that's not just something that you go, well, winter's coming, I'm going to add air to my tires. This is actually a regular maintenance thing that you should be aware of through the winter, is to monitor the pressure of your tires. Now, this is important with any car, but especially with an EV, mainly because EVs rely more on rolling efficiency, which is the rolling resistance of the tires, pushing the car through the air. And so with a gas cars have a surplus of energy in the fuel in the tank, more so than the surplus of energy that an EV has. So with a gas car, if your tires are a little bit out of their normal pressure range, you're not really going to notice much in the way of a gas mileage change. But with an EV, you definitely will notice a range decrease. You'll notice that the car is less efficient if the tire pressure is too low. And as the temperature changes in the winter, as it goes down and down and down, so will your tire pressure. So I tell people at least once a week, check your pressure. You know, for me, it's on a Saturday morning. I'll check tire pressure, and it's great because we have the TPMS sensors in this car, but I still like to go around and double check it occasionally. So again, monitor your tire pressure, not just before the winter, but through the winter as well. Item number 3, this would be your charging habits. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, normally I counsel people to, when you own an EV, it's best to charge it to 80, maybe 90%, something like that for daily driving, and to reserve charging all the way to 100% for those times when you need the extra range. But it's best for the longevity of the battery if you stay at maybe 80 or 90% at a full charge, and try not to drop it below 20% unless you need to. But staying between that, I call that the 80-20 rule. Stay between 80% at the top, 20% at the bottom, as much as you can. You know, it's fine to invade those areas when you need to, but for normal day-to-day driving, I tell people charge it to 80%, plug it back in at 20%, and that is true. However, in the wintertime, you may want to alter your charging habits. What do I mean by that? Well, as I mentioned before, your EVs are they're very dependent on efficiency to be able to give you the range that you need. In the wintertime, efficiency, the chemical reaction efficiency within the battery diminishes in the cold weather. So what ends up happening is you end up losing range. Now, some of that is due to added air density. As you're pushing the car through the air, colder air is more dense, and therefore it takes more energy. The rubber on the tires is stiffer, so that takes more energy to push the car. But also your battery is less efficient. Just the internal chemical makeup of the battery is such that it's less efficient in the cold weather, so you'll see a reduction in range that way as well. So you'll see typically anywhere from a 15% reduction in range all the way up to, goodness, it's possible to see as much as a 50%, a cutting in half of your range on the coldest of ultra cold Arctic days. So I tell people just to kind of bank on 25 or so percent, maybe 30% less range in the wintertime. So you're going to want to change your charging habits. Now, that doesn't necessarily just mean charge it up higher, although that can help. If you're used to charging your car to 70 or 80% during the summer, charge it to 90% in the winter to make sure you have range to drive. But when I say charging habits, there's something that I do with my car that can be helpful. And that is, I get up in the morning and I wake up probably an hour before I need to leave for work. I have my smartwatch laying right on my nightstand next to our bed. I don't bring my cell phone up with me, but this is my clock. So I'll wake up, and on my smartwatch I have the Clock Products Tesla EV app. So I can grab my smartwatch, and same as you would with a cell phone, and I go into the software for my Tesla, and it has been plugged in overnight. So I wake up and the charge is at 75%, 80%, whatever I set it for the night before. But while I'm there, before I even get up, I will go ahead and turn the charge up to 90%. And that way, when I go out to my car, it is charged up higher, and yet the car hasn't sat there at 90% all night long. I charged it higher right before I left, which is better for the battery. And there's a twofold benefit to doing that. The second benefit to it is charging of the battery, especially if you're charging it at all fast, which for me it would be level 2. Charging of the battery warms up the internal temperature of the battery pack. Not just warming it from the outside in, it warms the battery pack from the inside out. So now when I get up and go down to drive my car, the regen indicators, which on a Tesla will let you know the temperature of the battery is how much regen it's giving you, is noticeably higher because the internal temperature of the battery pack is higher. So again, peaking the charge, wake up, charge it overnight to maybe 80%, wake up in the morning, turn it up to 90 or 100% or whatever you want to turn it up to. So when you get out to the car, it's been charging at level 2 for an hour or whatever that duration of time is before you leave. You have more charge in the car, which will give you more range, and it's warmed up the battery, which will also give you more range. So like I said, change your charging habits. Now with other EVs, you don't necessarily have the app on your phone that you can do that. So if you're driving an EV that you can't do that, you're kind of stuck going outside and plugging your car back in or whatever to peak the charge in the morning. But that's something that's wise to do, especially with a Tesla, when you have the app and you can go ahead and do that from the warmth of your home. Item number 4, precondition the cabin. This, I can't emphasize the importance of this enough. So going back to what I was mentioning with the app for a Tesla, you can go in and change the state of charge or whatever you want to do from the app. You can also go in and turn on the climate control. And I found this to be a very valuable thing as well. When the car, during the winter time, if you turn on the heat, air conditioning does this as well, but the heat is really really affects the range of the car. When you get in an EV and start to drive it, you know how I mentioned that the efficiency of the EV is lower when the weather's cold? Well, you're also going to want to turn on the cabin heat. I mean, obviously, the car has heat. You don't want to freeze in your car. So you get in the car, you turn the cabin heat on. Well, that's fine, except that cabin heater is going to draw several thousand, 6,000 or 7,000 watts of energy from the battery to warm the cabin. Well, good grief, you're probably only averaging 9,000 or 10,000 watts to sustain speed driving the car. So just using cabin heat can cut your range by like 40%, at least while the cabin warms up. Once it's warmed up, maintaining the temperature in the cabin isn't so energy depleting, but initially warming the cabin is. So what I tell people to do is get up, turn like I said in the last item, turn your state of charge up, but also turn the cabin heat on. Now that will slow how fast the car charges from level 2 because you're using some of the energy to warm the cabin, but it will still charge the car extra, and you can warm the cabin up before you go out to the car. And warming the cabin has multiple benefits. Number one, when you go out to the car, the cabin is now warm. In fact, what I do is I turn the cabin heat to 80 degrees, 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And I also turn my seat heater on to 3 bars. And I do that for anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour before I go out to the car. I want the interior of the car and every surface I touch to be nice and warm. The reason for that is you don't want to just warm up the air. If you turn the cabin heat on 10 minutes before you leave, it's helpful, but you get out to the car, all the surfaces are still cold, which means the air in the car is going to cool off very rapidly because all the surfaces in the car, all the thermal mass in the car is still cold. So again, it can be very helpful to turn up the temperature long before you go out to the car. And why do I turn it up extra high? Well, for a couple reasons. One, you open the door to get in the car, you're letting a lot of the heat out. I want to warm the internal surfaces of the car as warm as I possibly can. So I get in the car, close the door, and it's toasty in here. That means I don't need to use the cabin heat for quite some time. I can just use the seat heat. And now, as I mentioned, the cabin heat will draw several thousand, 6,000 to 7,000 watts of energy to initially warm up the car. The heated seat is like 50 watts. I mean, it's a minuscule amount of energy for the seat heat. And you'll be shocked how warm you can stay in an EV just with seat heat. In fact, I didn't precondition the cabin of my car, mainly because I had to use the charger to plug a different car in this morning. I got in my car, it was 50 degrees Fahrenheit. All I did, and I left for work, started filming this video, all I did is I turned my seat heat on 3 bars. It's currently 52 degrees outside. I haven't used the climate control in the car at all. I'm just driving with 3 bars of seat heat, and I feel great. The seat heater will give you far more heat into your body and make you far more comfortable without any cabin heat at all than you may realize. So And for me, I get in my car and let's say I preheated the cabin to 80 degrees, plus I have 3 bars of seat heat on. I get in the car, I turn the cabin heat off, but I leave the seat heaters on. I drive. It takes probably 2 service calls for me, which would be 2 hours of my day before I get in the car and think, I should probably turn the cabin heat on again. But by then, the sun is out, warming up my black interior, and that helps. So again, precondition your cabin before you get in the car. I cannot stress that enough. Another item that of benefit that gives you is any ice or snow on the windows of the car will thaw down if you turn the cabin heat on high enough, which again for me that would be 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and long enough. Typically for me that's about an hour. I go out to the car, the windows are all thawed down, I don't have to scrape them. Everything's clear on the car, so it saves me time, it saves me energy in my driving. And if you do it while the car is plugged in, you're not drawing energy from the battery, and it really only costs you pennies from your home power from the grid to accomplish this preconditioning of the cabin. Now the last item number 5, and that is to enjoy the benefits of an EV. Now, what do I mean by that? With a gas car, it goes something along these lines. Let's say you've got remote start. You'll remote start the car. Now, you typically wouldn't have the car on for an hour the way I mentioned preheating the cabin of an EV. For one thing, you'll use a lot of gas. For another thing, it's very wasteful. Another thing, it's hard on the environment. And most remote starts for a car, you remote start it and it shuts off after 10 minutes anyway. So here's a typical morning with a gas car. You either remote start it from the house, or you don't have remote start, so you got to get all donned in your winter attire, go outside, scrape all the windows of your gas car, get the door open, which the seals are probably frozen, you got to yank hard on the door, get in there, you're freezing, you sit down on the rock hard seat that's an ice cube, you start the car, you're gagging on fumes while you're continuing to clear off the car. With an EV, especially if you can precondition the car from an app, that's all gone. Those facets of the wintertime are gone. Item number 2, what if you have an older car or car with a lot of miles on it? Gas cars, the car may or may not start in the winter. The 12-volt batteries also lose efficiency in the winter, same as the high voltage traction battery for an EV does. So you have less cold cranking amps available for your gas engine, plus the oil gets thicker in the winter time, in the cold weather. I mean, even if you have a multi-weight oil that's supposed to help reduce that, there is still that effect that oil is thicker, it's harder to turn an engine over in the winter. So now you have a weaker battery turning over an engine that's harder to turn over with fuel that's cold, and it's hard on a gas engine to start when the weather is cold. So oftentimes gas cars won't start. Even later model cars, if it's ultra cold, really sometimes won't start. That is never an issue with an EV. That's not to say that it's a guarantee you're going to go outside and every morning your car's going to work. I mean, an EV can break down too. But EVs are far more reliable, number 1. Number 2, you don't have that engine starting effect. With an EV, you can get in it, turn it on, and just go. You don't have to warm up an engine, get the oil moving. You don't have to wonder, is the thing going to start? These are benefits of an EV. In fact, last winter I did a video on that EVs are the best car to own for the winter time, and I thoroughly believe that. You also you don't have that rough running of the gas engine, and you can hear people starting their gas engines in the morning, and you also hear the power steering pump whining and because the fluid is so cold. It is really hard on an operating system for a gas car to initially start up and get everything warmed up. Once all the engine and transmission, all the fluids are warmed up in a gas car, it will operate just fine. But it's that initial startup that's the problem. Initial startup and warming the car up, raising the temperature, that's not an issue for an EV. Some other benefits of EVs are you're not going to a gas station freezing your fingertips, and boy, if you ever get gasoline on your fingers in the winter, wow, you'll get frostbite because fuel evaporates quickly, so it has a cooling effect, and it's just, I find it to be unpleasant to go to a gas station in the wintertime. There's, gross cigarette butts on the ground, and it just, gassing up a car has never been one of my favorite things. but it's worse in the wintertime as well. With an EV, yeah, you're going to need to plug it in, but there's sort of a familiarity and it's different, a different sense to getting out of your car. There's a different effect on your psyche when you're getting out of your car in your own driveway and plugging your car in. So you don't have to go into shops for oil changes and all that during the winter. I find that bundling up and going outside in the cold weather and you know, dealing with the salt and all of that jazz, I would rather not do any maintenance to my car at all in the winter. With a gas car, you're probably going to need an oil change in the winter. There's going to be things you need to go to the gas station, and you don't need to do any of that with an EV. So again, that's my fifth item, is to just enjoy the benefits of an EV in the winter. The downside is you have reduced range, but again, I've given you guys some tools to work with to minimize that effect and get to the point where your EV is still plenty of range for you. And so just enjoy those benefits of an EV in the winter. So that's it for me for today. As the weather gets colder, I will add to this list of pieces of advice. But I have to tell you guys, since driving EVs, we have 3 EVs, 3 drivers in the house, 3 EVs. It feels fantastic to know that all 3 of us are out at the same time. None of us are burning any gas whatsoever. It is a wonderful thing. And I worry far less about being stranded somewhere in the wintertime with an EV than I do with a gas car. I really do. So there's a sense of security with an EV in the winter that you don't have with a gas car. So again, as long as you monitor the charge and just, you know, use these pieces of advice. But the same thing holds true with the gas car. There are certain things you need to know about gas cars. So when people tell me, well, an EV is inconvenient, you need to know all this stuff. Well, you need to know a bunch of stuff for a gas car too. It's just different stuff. So it's sort of a retraining of your thinking. Also with an EV, you don't have that going outside and going, oh my gosh, my car is out of gas. I gotta go to the gas station. I didn't gas it up yesterday, because you had it plugged in overnight. So you wake up in the morning, you know your EV is charged, unless you forgot to plug it in or your power went out or something. But in the wintertime, if your power goes out, you'd know it anyway. And so you get in your car, it's always charged. Every day you got a full tank, so to speak. And you can precondition the car. It's just a wonderful thing. So enjoy the benefits of an EV in the wintertime. So that's it for me for today. If you guys have any questions, and I'm sure there'll be many, leave them in the comments section below. If you guys have a swiveling screen mount kit on order, right now I'm running about 5 weeks or so backlog. Could even be as much as 6 weeks backlog, but basically about 5 weeks right now shipping. So that's where we're at. Thank you for ordering. If you want to order a swiveling screen mount kit or even just the stationary screen repositioning kit, there'll be a link to my Shopify page in the description below. And I think that's it for me. If you guys have any questions or statements for me regarding this video or about the screen mount kits, leave them in the comments section below. So thanks everybody. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and as always, stay charged. Bye-bye now.